What does it mean when an animal rights group kills most of the animals it rescues? People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, has called itself a shelter of last resort. Yet in 2011, even PETA's own reports showed they euthanized about 95% of the animals that came through their doors.
PETA killed over 95% of the pets it received last year,
with other years still topping 80%. We'll examine the shelter statistics, the legal and policy pushback, and the most controversial decisions that shaped PETA's public image, starting with how they first became a household name. Imagine a small team forcing open the doors of a locked research building and stepping into a room no outsider was supposed to see. Rows of cages, the smell of antiseptic, and primates staring back through metal bars. In the early 1980s, one such exposé would catapult PETA into the national spotlight. The public saw courage, but from the outset there were questions about whether this was justice or calculated theater. PETA had been founded in 1980 by Ingrid Newkirk and Alex Pacheco at a time when animal rights in the United States were still considered a niche cause. Animal welfare laws existed, but enforcement was inconsistent. Most Americans had never seen inside research labs or factory farms. PETA offered something new. Direct confrontation with hidden practices the public had never imagined. Early in its history, in 1981, PETA found its defining moment. Pacheco volunteered at a Maryland laboratory studying neuroplasticity. Inside, rhesus macaques were kept in small wire cages, some with untreated wounds and cramped surroundings. Pacheco began covertly taking photographs of what he saw. Rather than taking the material first to authorities, PETA shared it with the press, setting off a chain reaction. Images of restrained monkeys, limbs in bandages and faces frozen in distress appeared on front pages and TV screens across the country. Viewers wrote, called, and demanded action. The Silver Spring Monkeys case became the first police raid on a U.S. research lab over allegations of animal cruelty. It also ignited an extended legal battle and drew the attention of Congress. 17 monkeys were initially removed from the lab. Some were later resocialized, others, after scientific review, were euthanized. The outcome was a mix of victory and disappointment, celebrated by some, criticized by others. Even then, skepticism emerged. Some questioned whether elements of the story had been staged to produce more shocking images. Others worried that a media-first strategy risked undermining legal reforms by focusing on outrage over sustained policy change. For PETA, the lesson was clear. Graphic evidence paired with public spectacle could force an issue into the national conversation faster than traditional advocacy. That formula, exposure plus spectacle, would become a hallmark of PETA's work. It delivered results but also planted the seeds of deeper criticism. Supporters saw it as an unflinching way to fight entrenched cruelty. Detractors viewed it as prioritizing headlines over substance. The Silver Spring case proved that PETA could influence the fate of animals far outside the courtroom. In time, that same approach would shape how the group handled lives much closer to home and generate new questions about what protection really meant. What happens when an organization known for saving animals is documented as killing most of the ones it takes in? At its Norfolk, Virginia headquarters, PETA operates what it calls an open admission shelter of last resort, accepting any animal regardless of health, temperament, or adoptability. But state records show a stark pattern. In 2011, PETA reported euthanizing roughly 95% of the animals it received. More recent figures like the 2023 report of 3,136 animals taken in and 2,471 euthanized, about 78.8%, keep the questions alive. One incident in 2014 made the issue personal for many. Surveillance footage captured PETA workers removing a Chihuahua named Maya from a family's porch in Accomack County. She was euthanized the same day, without the required holding period. The family said she was healthy, not aggressive, and never surrendered. PETA apologized, paid the family $49,000 in a settlement, and was fined $500 for violating the 5-day holding requirement. Despite the payment, the damage was lasting. News segments replayed the footage and outrage reached well beyond animal welfare circles. The ripple effects went further. In 2015, Virginia passed Senate Bill 1381, a law requiring private shelters to be operated primarily for finding adoptive homes rather than for euthanasia. This legislation was widely understood as a direct response to PETA's shelter practices and the Maya case. It also signaled growing political willingness to act on public concerns about high euthanasia rates. Critics argue that PETA's approach treats companion animals as expendable, pointing to healthy or treatable animals among those killed. They question why neighboring shelters with fewer resources maintain death rates below 10%, while PETA's remain many times higher. PETA's defense is that most animals surrendered to them are gravely ill, severely injured, or dangerously aggressive, and that turning them away would mean condemning them to slow neglect or abandonment. Ingrid Newkirk has said publicly that she does not see life as an absolute right in every case. Instead, she views quality of life as the priority. The gap in euthanasia statistics between PETA and other shelters fuels suspicion. Investigations and former employees have alleged that animals that could have been adopted were sometimes euthanized instead. In a few cases, police found animal remains in dumpsters, and some employees faced charges before ultimately being acquitted. Whether or not these incidents reflected official policy, they reinforced a narrative that PETA's shelter was unlike most others. For families whose pets never made it out alive, these debates are not philosophical. They describe grief, betrayal, and the shock of losing an animal before they could even reconsider the decision to surrender. The stories and numbers have become inseparable from PETA's public identity, setting the stage for further scrutiny, not just of how they operate, but of the choices made by the people at the top. Some of the harshest criticism PETA faces comes when its own leaders appear to live by standards different from the ones they promote. Mary Beth Sweetland, then a senior vice president, has openly said she uses insulin to manage her diabetes. The medical history of insulin is clear. It was developed and refined through decades of experiments on dogs and other animals. Opponents point to this as a textbook double standard, rejecting all animal research in principle but accepting its life-saving benefits when the stakes are personal. The same tension surfaces in Ingrid Newkirk's statements about companion animals. She has argued that the very concept of pet ownership treats animals as property and is therefore wrong. Yet she has also lived with cats and dogs herself. To critics, that weakens the moral clarity PETA claims, suggesting that its absolutist positions can soften when applied to personal choices. These personal contradictions feed a deeper argument about trust. If prominent figures inside PETA can make exceptions for themselves, some ask, how rigid or sincere can the group's convictions be in practice? Strategic contradictions have also drawn fire. In 2008, PETA ran its Got Autism campaign, linking dairy consumption to autism. The claim leaned on two small studies, one with 20 children, another with 36, that noted a possible connection but did not prove causation. Autism specialists were quick to say that the evidence was too weak to support such a public claim, warning that parents might remove dairy from their children's diets without sound medical advice. Medical professionals, parents, and autism advocates condemned the campaign for exploiting a serious condition to provoke outrage. Other headline-grabbing moves sometimes crossed into territory critics called frivolous. In 2012, PETA sued SeaWorld, arguing that its orcas were enslaved under the U.S. Constitution's 13th Amendment. The case was dismissed. In another highly publicized effort, PETA tried to claim copyright on behalf of a macaque that had taken a selfie, with courts ruling that animals cannot own copyrights. Both legal gambits generated ridicule and were eventually thrown out. PETA has also been scrutinized for its links to direct action activists. Tax records show the group donated tens of thousands of dollars in legal support to individuals tied to the Animal Liberation Front, including funds to defend convicted arsonist Rodney Coronado. Such actions prompted congressional inquiries into whether the organization was indirectly supporting criminal activity. Yet, even with these controversies, PETA has achieved tangible wins. Undercover investigations have pushed some fashion brands toward fur bans and nudged companies to adopt alternative testing methods, but the gulf between its mission and its methods continues to be a fault line. And the wider that gap appears, the more its work is judged through the lens of contradiction rather than principle. This tension runs through PETA's history and sits at the heart of questions still being asked about its legacy and its leadership. PETA has brought unprecedented attention to animal suffering, yet has repeatedly chosen euthanasia and high-profile stunts in ways many see as indefensible. The record includes a year, 2011, when it euthanized about 95% of the animals it took in, and the 2014 Maya case that ended with a $49,000 settlement to her family. Which matters more, the animals spared through exposure and policy changes, or the ones lost inside its own shelter? If you have a view, share it below. If you want more deep looks at messy institutions, subscribe. And if you care about this issue, consider supporting shelters in your own community.